We are recording today's session. It will be made available on the Whova platform. I have a series of questions that we're prepared to pose to our panelists to just get us started. But if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please do put them into the Zoom chat. If you're coming in through Whova, we aren't monitoring the question and answer in that platform. So if you have questions, please put them in the Zoom chat. Our panelists today are Jeremy Boyles, Stacy Meadows, Sharon Galloway, Monica Black, and details about their experiences are available on the Whova platform with the information about their speaker roles today. But as we start answering questions, they'll have an opportunity to share a little bit more about their work experience. And Mr. Ackerman is stating he is having trouble getting into the Zoom call. All right, let's see. I think I can email him the link. And let's see, Marissa, do you have any insights as to what might be going on?
If we email him the link, then I can get him into being a panelist when he joins as an attendee.
All right. Let me see if I can get this here. Okay, so we will see if that works for Principal Ackerman. And if while we're waiting for Principal Ackerman to join us, if you, we're just kind of curious, you know, what maybe motivated you to join today's session. If you want to just to put some thoughts in the chat about any particular interest you have or something that you might be hoping to learn today, feel free to drop that into the chat. And our panelists today are a combination of school therapists, therapists that specialize in working with children. And we'll wait just another bit here, see if Principal Ackerman is able to get connected. Appreciate everybody's patience. All right. We'd like to hear of their experiences with pandemic-related trauma in children. And I'm going to ask our tech support, Marissa, if she sees any indication of Principal Ackerman being able to.
I do not see any indication of what.
All right, a couple other questions here. Someone who's an advisor to a sorority house on campus, surprised at the number of students who are coming to university with mental health diagnosis and medications. Anyone else notice this? And someone from CASA, the Child Advocate Agency, working with institutionalized mentally ill teen. And there's so much mental health stigma that it has to be especially hard for youth experiencing mental health issues. It'd be nice to learn how to support these youth who are going through mental health issues. All right. this is a session I certainly, wish we had, a lot longer today to delve into this, because of course this is a really complex issue, and certainly every child is different with unique situations. I think I'll go ahead and pose maybe a general kind of question that sorts of touches on the pandemic related issues that kids may be dealing with, but a general question to our panelists. What issues do you see rising to the top in these times that appear to be impacting the mental health of children and or teens?
I'll take that first, if that's okay. So
you.
my name is Sharon Galloway, and I'm a school-based therapist here in Eastern Green Elementary School. So I have the littles, as we call them, K through sixth grade. And, I think in terms of emerging issues, obviously COVID is this overarching beast that has, caused a complex array of issues for sure for our families. I think with that said, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, parental substance use, I think is a big problem. We lost 100,000 people last year alone to an opiate overdose. Currently, my caseload of 34 kids, a third of them have at least one parent who is deceased or incarcerated. And substance use just plays havoc with lots of families. Again, going back to COVID, when we sent everyone home, including the children, we oftentimes had sent kids home to families or, parental figures, guardians, grandparents, whatever, who were just not equipped, right, to manage all day. You can get your kid to the school bus at 7 a.m. and, pick them up at the school bus, around 4 o'clock. That's a long time to not be actively parenting. And I think by sending kids home 24/7 with folks in quarantine was really, that's just a really tough go. And then I think technology, we can maybe talk some about that as, double-edged sword. And then I think just with regard to time, time as a family is not a priority for a lot of people anymore. There's just too much other stuff to do. And I think that time is an interesting thing. We move very fast in this world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'll follow Sharon. Hi, I'm Stacy Meadows. I was a school-based therapist at Bloomington Graduation School and Binford Elementary, and started at North. What I noticed a lot, like what Sharon said, there's a lot of grief and loss over the last year. Grief and loss, not necessarily due to death, loss of familiarity, normality, all of those changes. And there was a lot of death. I've had a lot of young people, littles and adults that are young people, teenagers, that had a lot of loss, a lot of death, a lot of loss of relationships. Sorry, I'm with two dogs. But that's just what my experience has been specifically. And I think there's also been an increase in anxiety for my young people, unknowing what's going to happen. Let somebody else talk so my dogs can bark.
Thank you, Stacy. Before we have another panelist help answer this question, I just want to acknowledge Principal Ackerman has joined us, and thank you so much for taking time out of all that you have going on today to be here. I just was letting attendees know how much I have appreciated the role that you play in serving Edgewood High School students in particular, but helping to educate our community about the importance of mental health issues and supporting our students in their mental health needs as well as their academic needs. So thank you. And do you have the list of questions that we may be posing today? We've got some questions from our attendees as well.
I do, and thank you. I have been Zooming through a year and a half of the pandemic, and I have never had an issue, so I apologize for coming on late. I'm still not sure what was going wrong, so I apologize. I do have a list of questions. I wanted to give just kind of a quick introduction as well. I was asked to do that just from the high school, from our perspective here at Edgewood High School. During the past 5 years, even prior to the pandemic, we had seen a substantial increase in students with moderate to severe emotional and mental health issues. The past 2 years during the pandemic, it has really just skyrocketed. Because of this, in response to this, we have added a full-time therapist from adult and child. Lane does an incredible job, but have found that that's not even enough. So we are getting ready to add another part-time position through a multi-million-dollar TIMS grant that we have. We have added several school psychologists to our pre-K through 12 program. We have a half-time school psychologist here at the high school now, and we will have an additional 2 counselors to support that person, or psychologists to support that person as well. At the school, we've begun implementing a homeroom where we try to build a family environment. We've trained all of our staff in TBRI, also Y-Try, which I think most are familiar with TBRI, but not the Y-Try training. We have teachers are filling out 4 times a year SABRS, which is a screener to try to identify those students. We have a student services coordinator, and we have a committee that meets every Thursday just to talk about the different students and interventions at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So in response to, I was really excited to have this opportunity to be a part of this, because in response to the high needs that we have, we've really tried to implement some changes here at Edgewood High School. So,
thank you.
So moving on to a couple of questions, and I'm not sure if you have had any discussions or asked any of the questions at all, but what issues do you see rising to the top that appear to be impacting the mental health of children and or teens? And I just heard one speaker talking about there's been a rise of parent death. Not sure, we've had some, I'm not sure I could say that in our school, but what other issues have really surfaced other than the pandemic? I think the pandemic is an obvious, but the issues around the pandemic, but then other issues that have really caused this rise in mental health issues with teenagers.
So Principal Ackerman, I was just stating about substance use, primarily parental substance use. We do have, I'm here in Eastern Green, and we have an awful lot of kids that, have parents that are in active addiction. I think, a big part of that isn't so much the death per se. I mean, we have probably a third of my caseload has at least one parent who's either incarcerated or has died. And Stacy Meadows alluded to this, with this idea about grief and loss. It's a huge problem for our kids. And so looking at that has, I think, changed an awful lot in terms of how we practice a lot of trauma-informed care, and really getting in there and helping kids to develop those resiliency skills and that kind of set, because it's just really needed right now.
Anyone else? Okay.
So I'm Jeremy Voiles. I don't know if my camera's on. I can't figure this thing out. I'm a psychologist in the pediatric doctor's offices. So all the pediatricians, the 5 offices in Martinsville, Bedford, and then the 3 in Bloomington, 1 in Ellettsville. And we went from 1,800 referrals in the year before the pandemic to 7,800 in the first year of the pandemic. And I haven't looked at this year's numbers. And what I mainly focus on are younger children, say 6th grade on down, although I see all ages. And I'm seeing not only a lot of anxiety, but a lot of lack of surety. What's going to happen? What's going to go on? What's next? And along with that, such a reduction in socialization that a lot of the 2 and the 3-year-olds don't know how to behave anymore because they haven't had to. And so I'm getting a lot of reparenting and doing some of that as well. But one of the interesting things in the pandemic is that the question about stigma that came up earlier, the stigma for mental health concerns has reduced dramatically for teens and preteens. And so I found that fascinating through all of this.
That
Sorry.
is fascinating. Yeah. Anyone else want to respond to that? That's an amazing statistic from 1800, I think you said, to 7800 in that short time.
Yeah.
Thank you for that response, Jeremy. Sharon, what other issues in school with school age children and at school have you seen?
So we kind of alluded a little bit to technology as really being kind of this double-edged sword in this, all or nothing world. A lot of, I think young people are spending a good number of hours, hours plural, with technology. It can be really beneficial, obviously, for educational purposes, for kids with cognitive and emotional issues. We have like these wonderful apps now, like calm.com, and just all these different kind of mindfulness apps that can be really helpful for young people as well as older people. But I do think that this amount of time that children are spent unsupervised or without parental, controls or understanding even about what they're at. There's a wonderful, if I may, just a great site online called commonsensemedia.org. And there's just all kinds of like parent guides about how to understand the importance of parental controls, how to look at that and why we need to look at that. Something as simple as Roblox, which I think all of my kids are, definitely on a great deal. How easy it is to go from 1, 2, 3 click to real predatory kinds of things and more adult content. So I think, those kinds of things are important for us to look at that we didn't have to deal with, even 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Even, and I don't know, I'm asking this question, Jeremy, maybe you can answer, but we were, other administrators and I were talking, but we're wondering when they're going to come out and say that media and technology has the same addiction as nicotine. We've got students that we really in the classroom, they cannot have their cell phones out, and some kids cannot do it. It's just really troublesome to see how hard of a time they have that they cannot put it away for just a few minutes. So Jeremy, is there anything that you've heard or any studies that talk about the addiction to technology?
In the mid to early 90s, there was research done on violent video games and how the link from violence and aggression to violent video games was more potent than the addiction of smoking. And that was done more than 20 years ago. And so I have no question that it will happen. I don't have the current research on it though, but that was like 95 or something. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to chime in if I can. My name is Monica Black. I'm the clinical coordinator at the Youth Services Bureau of Monroe County, and previously worked with Jeremy as the social worker. I miss you too, my friend. It's nice to see your name at least. And so, Jeremy and I were together, doing therapy on our unit during the pandemic. And so even though I'm not there now, I'm across the street, it's still teens over here at the Youth Services Bureau. And something I've noticed over the last year and a half is certainly a rise in anxiety and how that's linked to social media usage and that double-edged sword that we talked about. I think Sharon brought that up about how being able to access social media was the only way a lot of youth, especially teens, could feel any sort of connection to their own peer groups, to their friends, to get into chat rooms, to do Zoom calls. And so it was like a lifeline to so many young folk. And at the same time, spending hours and hours and hours at a time on social media can create a false sense of what reality is, because you're scrolling through everyone's doctored and manicured photo shoots and filters. And so when we get a lot of teen girls, especially, those are kind of my favorite group. I would say, you know, how much time do you spend? And they'd say, well, probably like 6 hours. Most of them are tracking how much time on their phone, and 6 hours is like excessive, right? And then I would say, you know, do you find yourself just scrolling through and comparing yourself to pictures of other people, or comparing yourself to, oh, it's the pandemic, but everyone else is out doing all this stuff. And, you know, maybe they're just in their backyard, you know, they're not even doing much, but they're making it look really cool or intriguing or fancy. And so not only do you have this connection to your people, but then you also have this constant, I'm comparing myself to everyone else, to everyone else's experiences, to their looks, to their clothes. And that has created a lot of anxiety and depression within teen girls. And there's lots of statistics on teen girls experience higher rates of self-harm and suicidal ideation and acts when their time on social media is increased. So it's just like this, how do you don't want to take it away from them because it's a pandemic, they can't get with their people, or they couldn't, but you know, before, vaccines have certainly helped, but we're not through the thick of it. But then also, how do you protect their mental health when their lifeline is causing that? And so I just wanted to add that's, I don't have the answers, but I certainly agree, even though I'm a licensed clinical social worker and have not published a study on this, that social media was designed to target the same aspects of our brain where addiction lies, whether it's addiction to cigarettes or alcohol or chocolate or food. It's still firing the same chemicals. And so we have to deal with that, because kids aren't the only ones who are addicted to social media. We are as well. I mean, not me, because I don't have it, but all right. So I just wanted to share. Thanks so much. Really happy to be here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I apologize. I didn't realize that our guests have not been introduced. So we do have Jeremy Boyles, psychologist with Riley Pediatrics, Stacy Meadows, who's a school-based therapist at Adult and Child Health, Sharon Galloway, who's a school-based therapist at Eastern Green, and then Monica Black, clinical coordinator with the Youth Services Bureau. So I want to make sure we get everybody in there. I think, Stacy, you're the only one I haven't heard from. Do you have anything to add to that?
I had started out by saying I support what everybody else has said. I think I've noticed the whole unsurety of things has been the biggest thing for young people and my younger kids. Lack of, always changing, constant transition with schools, especially like we're in, we're out, especially through last year, online, in person. I've had a lot of kids really struggle that have anxiety. That BGS is a smaller school, so kids that already struggle maybe with a larger school setting, and engaging with lots of people, going back to in person was a big deal for them. And so the school kind of supporting them through that, but it was a big change, and supporting them through that was something that I noticed specifically the start of this school year. Yeah, that's it right now.
Okay, thank you. Kara suggests, if you look at the chat, she suggests that everyone consider watching The Social Dilemma. She thinks it's on Netflix, but Monica followed that up with The Social Dilemma. Is a great film that talks about the effects that social media actually is having on our brains. Highly recommended, and it is on Netflix. So thank you very much. Any other comments before I move on to the next question? I'm kind of curious, being a high school principal. So in a number of you see students at different, do you see a higher increase in needs in teenagers versus younger children? So if you broke it into elementary, middle school, high school, is there a difference in the needs? Jeremy, you talked about going up to 7,800. Are the highest percentage of those at any age bracket?
I don't know the percentage of the numbers there. Monica and I were both trouncing through it at that point. I mainly work with younger children, and so my view of it is the younger children more, but I doubt that's accurate, because there's more younger children are watched more because they have to be, and so there's more monitoring at least built in. And so I would wonder if the stats would be skewed just based on that.
Anyone else before I move on?
Yeah, I would have. Oh, sorry, Sharon. I would have, of course, this is Jeremy and I's perspective because I work with teens. So I would have been like, oh, the teens are the ones really struggling. So it's, I appreciate Jeremy and I, Jeremy acknowledging like, well, I probably have a skewed perspective because I certainly do. It just felt like there was an assumption that, well, teens get to be home, they get to be on their phones, they get to watch Netflix all day. They're fine. They're okay. And for a little bit, they were okay, right? The first couple of weeks, it was like party in my bedroom, But I think the long term, that being so prolonged, and then the on again, off again school schedule that we had to deal with, and being quarantined, I think it just really took a toll. So I think all the age groups struggled and are still struggling, but they have different needs, right? I think littler kids, they don't necessarily, their social world can be kind of augmented or filled in with different things. Whereas teenagers, like, you cannot replace teen on teen time together. Like, no amount of time with their parents is going to make up for that. So just different needs. And Sharon, I'll pass to you since I interrupted you.
Thanks. No, that's so very important. I was just thinking, out here in Eastern Green, again, we're a rural community. In our school district, which is K through 12, we have less than 1,500 students. With that said, and Stacy Meadows was a wonderful guide and mentor for me. We just started this program out here. And what we see is that we're full. We cannot possibly see any more children than we do, and that's K through 12. We're in the process of looking to hire at least 2 or 3 more skills specialists to help, and we're also looking at potential for another therapist in the middle school. We have one in the high school and myself in the elementary. With that said, I think that there's an equal number of kids that are waiting, right? So we have a lot of kids that are waiting. Their needs, I think, are pretty much the same in terms they run in, anxiety, depression, isolation, grief, loss. The older kids, however, it's about really keeping them in school and helping them to navigate hope and optimism. Little people just are sponges and they're going to absorb what we give them, right? Older kids have this understanding and awareness that the world is not as hopeful and positive as we would like. And so I think those kids that are waiting, I think we see much more in terms of suicidal ideation, and we see even intent and planning. We've had just way too many youth suicides out here in Eastern, and actually in just Greene County in general. And again, you combine that with parental substance use and poverty and the lack of internet. I mean, the saddest thing for me when I got here was the reckoning that we sent all these kids home. They don't even have the internet out here. So how did they do that? They showed up at the Dairy Queen parking lot, or they showed up at the school parking lot in the middle of the evening to submit their work on their Chromebook because they just didn't have it. So I think, a lot of that has to be thought through. But when you ask, like, the needs of the younger kids or older kids, it's like, wow, there's just too much. There's a lot there. Yeah.
I'll follow Sharon. I worked with both littles and high schoolers during this time. And I would say the need is there and it's magnified during this time. And it was increased, I think, for all ages. The one thing that I think helps them is structure and routine. And when that is disrupted for any person, adults included, structure and routine was interrupted for all ages. And so all of our needs kind of came up to the surface, and we see it differently for young kids and teenagers. And I don't really work with middle school kids, but I'm sure they kind of fall in there as well. Behaviorally, littles, it's more behavioral. I think you see it kind of in how they adjust to roles and things like that, especially in a school setting. With high schoolers, they're more verbal. I think you can see it very differently, but I think it's kind of equal with all ages. And structure and routine have a lot to do with that. And that's why it's important for them to have school is important. Parents creating some sort of routine and structures is important, whatever way that looks like for social interaction or things. So.
Thank you. So another question, overcoming the stigma of counseling or therapy. I know I experience a lot of situations with kids where I know that they could really benefit, even at the lowest level, just talking to the school counselor, and teenagers can be really resistant to that. It seems like either they're resistant to it or they're all in. They understand that they need this, and that they'll tell you that they see a counselor. So it almost seems like it's one way or the other. So does anyone have any recommendation in helping kids, kind of leading them through or guiding them through that stigma of seeing a counselor? Actually expressing your feelings and taking that opportunity to do that.
I can just say that, I think we definitely need to continue to create those safe spaces and have those conversations just broadly in general out in the school, for the kids and for the parents. I see a lot of children who are, really guarded, and they're not really wanting to open up a whole lot, but their parents want them there, or here, which is good. I also see kids who are so afraid to tell you what's actually happening, because they don't know the consequence for what that's going to be. We have a lot of DCS, intervention out here for sure. I think though, just kind of one of the things that struck me just being here for a month or two is how many young people are bringing up their friends. This is my friend Allie, and her mommy and daddy, are fighting, or daddy's in jail like my daddy. Can you see her too? And I think, how we navigate those conversations with the parents and the guardians about the benefits of having mental health here in the school is really essential. I have families that are, stay away from my kid. But I also have a lot of families that once they understand what this is all about, are amazed and grateful. And yes, please, please see my child. I think it speaks a lot too to the fact that there are just not enough providers. There's not enough understanding of community mental health, but there's certainly not enough providers. And so to be able to do this in the school with the kids and with the families, it's just, I never thought I'd work with little people. I've worked an awful lot with people with substance use disorders. So here in Greene, I've worked with the parents and now I'm working with the kids. And I think it's just really an interesting dynamic.
Thank you. Anyone else? And that actually leads to, your comment leads to a question that came up in the chat room. So quantity versus quality, how do you overcome that? We all know that the quantity is not there because we need more therapists, more counselors. How do you kind of balance that on your caseload?
Well, I can certainly speak to this because, Jeremy's still doing it, but at IU Health, we're seeing like between 20 and 30 kids a week, and our schedules were filled up for 6 weeks. And so it just felt, and I don't know, Jeremy, if it's gotten any better. I don't think it has. I haven't been there. And so it felt really daunting and overwhelming to me. And I think certainly the pandemic brought to light an issue that all of us who've been in the field for a number of years already knew, that we're understaffed, we're underpaid, we're underappreciated, we're underrepresented. And now it's like tenfold because our communities demand. I mean, if you call around to places around town right now, most people have a closed wait list, or it's a wait list that's weeks or months long. And it's just like overwhelming for everybody. And so that's an issue. And how do we fix that? Recruit. I think, Bloomington is this amazing place with this university that has all these educated humans that our community pours a lot of resources into, and then they don't stay. They leave, they go back to their own home, or they go somewhere else. And so how do you retain this well-educated population here that has the skills that we need? How do you get them to want to make roots here? And I grew up in this town, so it's not a hard sell for me to like stay here, because I have a lot of investment, because my family's here, my husband, my in-laws. But when you come to Bloomington to study, like staying here doesn't necessarily, for some people, isn't always that appealing. So I think we need to work on that kind of, how do we strategize with this population, even if it means getting a couple folks from each department to stay for a couple years, get them licensed, but you have those boots on the ground to help you, because that's really what we need. In terms of convincing teens that therapy is good and awesome and wonderful, I think it's all about your approach. And again, I'm totally biased because I love, like, send me some sad, anxious teenagers all day and I'm in my happy place. And I know that's not everyone's cup of tea. And I didn't think it would be mine either. I thought I was going to be a really small person counselor, but the teens found me. And I think one thing that I try so hard in therapy sessions to do is to just be myself, be authentic, because it's already scary enough to talk to someone you don't know. And so my efforts in the beginning are just to make the space as comfortable as possible. And one thing I try to do, kids think, oh my God, I'm in therapy, there's something wrong with me. Well, there's nothing wrong with any of us, because we're having emotions. Emotions are a normal part of the human experience. And so I really try to put out there, like, it's okay that you're having feelings. The feelings aren't the problem. It's what you're maybe doing with those feelings or how you're acting on those feelings. That's the issue. But we all feel sadness. We all feel joy. We all feel grief. We all feel pain. And so I think sometimes what I found is parents saying, well, my kid won't talk to me. They won't they won't tell me how they're feeling. And my response is, well, do you tell them how you're feeling? Well, no, I don't want to upset them. I don't want to freak them out. But if you're not demonstrating how to talk about feelings, and you're their primary caregiver and their number one teacher on the planet, how are they going to know how to talk about them if you're not, it's not just an intuitive thing. Kids have to be shown. And so a lot of my work has just been trying to help parents, like, you're not going to break your kids if you talk about your own emotional response to the stress or the sadness. It might help them open up more. And I think there's a lot of pressure on kids to open up and talk about your feelings, but they don't have a real model for how that's done. So I would encourage all parents, parents are constantly like, I want to protect my kids from my own feelings, but I think that almost does more harm than it does good, because we're just shooting ourselves in our foot. And I really think just normalizing the experience that just because a parent wants their child to go to therapy does not mean they think something is wrong with them, but framing it like, we want to help give you all the support you need, because this is a really challenging time. Not, you're sad and we need someone to fix you, because we don't fix people. People aren't broken. So I could go on and on, but that is like my bullet point snapshot on how to make this palatable for teenage people.
Great, thank you. Jeremy?
Well, I can't say it as well as Monica said it, of course, but one of the things I do very early on is I lay out confidentiality and very clearly explain it and let them know I can't tell anyone anything. I'm not here to tell your parents what you tell me. I'm just here to listen to you. You would be on your couch if things were working well. Something's not working. I'm going to try and help. And that's it. That's my job. It's not about you being broken or wrong, just like Monica said. It's something's uncomfortable, and I'd like you to be more comfortable.
Very good. So there are a number of participants today, and all of us work with youth. So what advice can you give us? What signs should we as adults be watching for to indicate if a child is in real distress? Are there recommended questions that you would suggest that we ask? How can we help identify and get kids to the services that they need?
So,
Well,
I mean, oh, sorry, Jeremy, you're much more appropriate for this one. Go ahead.
No, I'm not at all, but mine is brief, so I'll talk briefly. Like Monica said, ask them. Be open. Really ask them. Don't just say, you doing all right? You doing all right? Look them in the eye and say, how you doing? You good? Really look at them, because the times, even in the checkout lane at Kroger's or something, where you stop and look at someone, you get these stories. And just taking that moment to really be with them there is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, it is really important to talk to kids about what they're feeling. And Monica, I absolutely agree. We need to understand that parents and guardians need to be looking within, right? And seeing how that's coming out with regard to what they're feeling and what they're thinking about, and sharing that with the kids. I think too, just, you know, kind of basic things about just check-ins and spending that time. You know, I mentioned early on about time. It's no longer a priority. I met with a little girl yesterday and we were having a great session. And I said, how was your weekend? She said, it was awesome. And I said, that's great. What happened? And she said, I was home. I got to be home all weekend with my mom. We didn't have any visitations. We didn't have anywhere we had to be. We were home. She got to be in her own room for a considerable amount of time with her mom. And she loved that. And I think that that kind of stuff is really important. Having family meetings, having expectations and agreements with each other that how we're going to communicate. I'm going to tell you about my day and you're going to tell me about your day. I'm going to tell you about what makes me anxious and you're going to tell me about what makes you anxious. Just some of those real basic things I think are essential, and they're not always happening for people. So those are just, you know, kind of some of those ideas, is to really reinforce with parents that you guys have this, you got this, but let's communicate it to our kids.
So I'm going to take that question one step further and ask, what point does it become that we should identify this is critical? We're trying to help lead children to resources and trying to help them see that they would benefit. But at what point do we just stop and say, I've got to do it now? Maybe it's a CPS referral. So kind of talk through that a little bit, if you would, please.
I think I'll speak to that. And I think one of the things that, with regards to that question, is safety. Is there a sense of safety? And I know that that's really hard to see, because if I think about all of the young people that I've worked with, all of their signs and triggers look different. And it's really hard, I think, for teachers and support people that are engaging with them to always recognize, especially if you have a really, really quiet kid. I have a lot of young people that are quiet, and you would never know that there was something really severely wrong. So I think, like Jeremy said, you know, asking them, being genuine, and giving them the space to say it. And I think recognizing when there is a safety issue or a concern, like listening, having your ears and your eyes open, and then creating a space where they can come to you and verbalize that is going to be really important. And that rapport and that relationship building is key, because a kid will let you know in different ways that something is not okay inside of them. All of my kids have some communication, whether it's nonverbal, verbal, they will let somebody know. And our relationship and how we are able to be attuned to that takes time. And I know it's hard as a principal, I would imagine, with all of the students that you have coming, to be able to do that. And that's, you know, where your counselors and your staff are important to have those touch points. And being able to have communication among your staff, I think, would be really important. So if you have a teacher, a math teacher, and who has a really good rapport or relationship with a particular kid, and they say that something's up, listen to them. And then that's would be a good point to be like, hey, this is something that needs to happen. So that's just a little bit. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that.
think it's really important to just, be looking to our children to see if we see things like doubt and worry and sadness. I mean, those are the basics, right? But then also just to take it a step further, and I think it's important, it's age appropriate, it's developmentally appropriate, but asking our kids, do you ever think about hurting yourself? I think that, I do crisis at night. I do a lot of assessments for our youth that are coming in needing hospitalization. And I think the hardest thing is to help parents understand it's okay to have this conversation. It's more than okay. It's really important to ask your child, have you been thinking about hurting yourself? And what is that like? What's that about? Can we have that conversation? And to really, again, going back to technology, check in with your kids on texting and Snapchat and Instagram and all these things that I refuse to use, but I'm learning so much about them, to really understand what those conversations are that they're having with their peers. I'm not saying go spy on your kid, but I am saying let's have an understanding about how to monitor some of that stuff, again, depending on the age of your child. And finally, going back, it is so important for families, guardians, parents to talk about what they're thinking, what they're feeling. What was life like for them when they were that age? And then respect, recognize, tolerance, no judgment about your children's emotions. I think parents get very upset if their child is failing or not thriving or having some kind of doubt or suicidal ideology. I think that, or ideation rather, I think you have to, make and help parents understand this is okay. We need to have these conversations. It's all right.
Yeah, I also, we've all said it in a variety of ways. I think it's how you frame what you're asking and what language you're using, because a lot of kids can feel like it's really finger pointing, and as adults, we don't mean to, but we're like, you seem sad, you don't seem okay, you seem upset, you're acting this way. And it's a lot of you language. So what I try to do with kids, even though the response sometimes is, I don't know, which is okay, is, what can I do to help you? Is there anything you can think of that might make things a little easier? Or is there anything you need that I could maybe help get or work on getting or help you create that would make things a little bit better for you? Because you never know what kids are thinking. Like, and obviously if it's a new Xbox or something, like there's limits to what, that's not a solution to everything. But I think sometimes kids are like, what would really be helpful is if you printed off some word searches for me, or if you gave me some ideas. Like sometimes I just hand kids this 100, coping skills sheet, and they're like, oh my gosh, thank you. I just need like a visual reminder of something that can help me when I'm feeling down in my room. I can look at this and go through and, oh, okay, I have an idea of something that can kind of get me out of it. So sometimes I just like to frame the question to ask the kid, they're the expert. What can I do to help? And even as a parent, as a teacher, I think that's a really good question because you never know what kids are thinking. They might have the answer for you,
I would love to see lamination devices in every family home. When you sit down for a family dinner and you're talking about agreements and expectations and hopefulness and optimism, and capture each other's intent and words and the things that are, you can unify on those things that are important to you, and then write them down, right? Post them, put them on the fridge, stick them on the wall, on the back of the front door. So before you leave in the morning, you emphasize with each other, this is what we agree, this is what we believe in as a family with regard to hopefulness and communication and caring about each other. Those things are really, I think, important.
Very good. Anyone else? Thank you. I'm out of questions, so I would like to open it up on the chat to others that have questions. I maybe have stolen the show a little bit from the school perspective. So is there anyone from other organizations that would like to ask questions specific to the youth that they work with? Anyone? Very good. In closing then, I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to just kind of close and let us know. I've got a question from Kevin. I'd love to see an example of a one-sheet handout for youth on coping skills. So, Monica, maybe you have that.
Yeah,
Sharon, who said that?
Yeah, I cannot take credit for making this. This is like, therapist folklore. Things get passed down and passed down. I do have it. I could scan it and maybe send it to Stephanie or something, and she could send it out. Maybe I'll put that on my list because I have no idea who's here or or how to get it. I'll send it to Stephanie and put it in Stephanie's court. Sure.
And Lisa, is
There's one you
there
can
going to
Google
be a
called 99
resource?
coping skills.
Yeah, Jeremy, it's the 99 coping skills.
Yeah, you can Google it.
Oh,
Okay.
you can Google it. Okay, I'll do what I said I was gonna do because sometimes people just want an email, but you can, 99 coping skills. It's Googleable.
Very good, thank you.
And we will be adding some resources to the Whova platform, but all the attendees and participants, panelists, and everyone will be receiving some follow-up communications from Stephanie Solomon asking for your feedback about the summit sessions. So we can include that in an email as well. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. So in conclusion, Sharon, is there anything you'd like to add that maybe got missed that you would like to include?
I don't know. I love this conversation. I will say we need to keep these conversations alive and going. And if you know anyone who's thinking about joining the helping profession, for Pete's sake, have them stay in Indiana, send them to school, let them know how valuable they are and how needed they are.
Very good, thank you. Monica?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for coming and for allowing us to kind of engage in this conversation because, again, the pandemic put a spotlight on this that I think we were all maybe unprepared to face. And certainly our community is now dealing with we were not prepared for this. How could anyone prepare for, war against an invisible enemy, essentially. And so I would say for my own heart of hearts, please love the therapists and social workers that are in your families and friend groups, because this has been extremely stressful for us to be a therapist and a helper during the pandemic. I personally said it lots of times to Jeremy while we were together, this is like a lot for me. And I'm having my own pandemic experience, and then every day you're helping others get through this. And so I just want to put a shout out to supporting and loving the people who do this work in whatever capacity, just really lifting them up and encouraging them, because this has been extremely difficult for all of us. And in a general sense, don't be afraid to share with kids your own stuff. I think as adults, we get really hung up on, I have to be strong, or I have to be brave, or I can't show my emotions. And I just think this is the biggest fallacy to how we connect as humans. And if we don't show them the way and be examples for them, I don't know how kids are supposed to get it. And I guess I was raised by a therapist, so I had a head start on all of this. To me, it's just well, of course you do that, because my mother was, I joked that I was in therapy my whole life because I was raised by a therapist. So I get that it's not easy for everybody, and that what seems so normal and of course we do that, that is not intuitive for a lot of people. So reach out for help, and you're not broken and you're not crazy, and we're all kind of trying to figure out life together. So just thanks so much, and thanks for all the work everyone does.
Very good, thank you, Monica. Stacy?
First of all, thank you for letting me be a part of this panel. I want to just encourage everyone to give yourselves grace and give our young people grace as we're all figuring this out and walking through this. And really, it's okay, where we're at. And as we're walking through this and learning from each other, that's it's going to take time. And so I think just encouraging one another and our young people in the best way we know how to. And just, that's it. So thank you. And just encourage yourself to give yourself space and time to be who you are and where you're at. And the same for our young people. So.
Very good, Stacy. Thank you. And Stacy shared copingskillsforkids.com. Copingskillsforkids.com. She said that's a great resource. And Jeremy, I'll let you finish up, please.
Oh my. Well, so not to repeat, except for thanks for everyone for being here, and thanks for all of the work you guys do with kids. To not repeat anything, we've had a loss of social interactions for everybody during this past 2 years, 14 years, 12 years, however long it was in the pandemic. And it's going to be important to remember who are the people that you want to connect with. Reach out to them, remember them, be with them, and really authentically be with people. Because that's what we've lost through this. We get Instagram, we get Facebook, if you have those things, like Monica, I don't. But that was a choice because I knew the false front it was putting up. Go be real with people, find your friends, talk to them, reach out, because we need to do that again as humans.
Not just kids. We all need to do that. So thank you. I think that's great advice, Jeremy. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for this very informative session. Our presenters were outstanding. Thank you. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure we could sit here for 2 or 3 hours and you would continue to share and we would all benefit. So thank you very much. And this ends the session. So remember to turn to WOVA, the agenda, and there will be other opportunities, information presented there. And thank you very much. It's been a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.